Hello, my name is Sveiks, and today I'm gonna do a Rage Ethics Decktech. I reached rank 1 with this deck today. Well, technically I'm rank 2, but I was rank 2 a lot of times, and at the moment we have equal elo with Sonnalan, and we just decided to stop grinding and decided to sit at that elo until someone catches us. So, moving on to the deck. This is how the deck looks. Basically, it's a Rage Rush deck with some pretty OP cards added to it. At first, let's start with the hero. Well, I actually think I need to do this to show you the hero. The hero is a new hero from a bunch of new cards released a few days ago. It's Ethics Realm Guardian. And well, it has 25 HP, and whenever you play a non-ancient spell, lose 1 life. Both of these are pretty irrelevant, but you get an additional card to your starting hand, and that's absurdly strong. An additional card is extremely valuable. To show you how valuable it is, I will need to do some really advanced maths, and I really didn't do them, but trust me, the hero is really strong. So, if you look at the deck, we have at first, let's go over the typical Rage Aggro things. It's obviously 4 Lizard Barbarians, because essentially this deck is a Rage Aggro. It's obviously 4 Goblin Warriors, because essentially this deck is a Rage Aggro. And then there are 4 Torso Dorks, which have also been a staple in Rage Aggro for a long time. Then there are 2 Goblin Fireworkers, which are not 2 great cards, but I think I need some cards in the 2 slot. So I just run 2. This might be good for example, you can also run, if you encounter many Holy Radiances, you can probably cut Goblin Fireworkers, add in Venerated Unicorns, for example. That's a possibility. Then we have a new card, Boar Rider. 3 mana 3/4. This is basically impossible for any control deck to deal with. It is fucking 4 HP. The only way a control deck is gonna deal with it is freeze plus damage. And still, then it's most likely due for run. It's really insane. Yeah, it can't trade really well, but it can still trade reasonably. Because, well, it can put a target emblem, and then also we have 3 Flame Rune Warriors, which can also put the target emblem on an enemy creature, enabling Boar Rider to trade. Also, Flame Rune Warrior is pretty reasonable, for example, against soldiers, in the mirror match, even against Corruption Control, it can remove their Mesmerizing Spirit. Basically, against any 1 health creature, this is just insane. Then from the Rage cards, we also obviously have spells, 4 Fireballs. Well, I don't need to really explain why we play Fireballs, right? Then we have 3 Fire Blasts, and I really think that you should not go under 3 with Fire Blasts. Fire Blast makes so many matchups like really favorable, like soldiers, elves, etc. Fire Blast is a really good card, don't cut them. And now moving on to the Nature Wisdom package. Obviously, to run the Nature Wisdom package, we have Dragon of the Pact. We always go Nature Wisdom level with it, never go anything else. And if you draw your 2nd, 3rd or 4th Dragon, you always Divine Offer them away and look for Rage Rains. And now the cards. Why we run the Dragon package? Well, let's start with the 2 most OP ones. 4 Shifting Auras. This is a 2 mana 3/1 ranged swift creature. It can trade whenever it comes to the board, and it also acts as a burst. You can just go 3 to the face with it. Even though most of the times you use it to trade, let's be honest, but it can also really enable some cheeky littles. Then we have 4 Themias. And this is partly the reason why this deck is so strong. You go, for example, you start off with the Lizard Barbarian or Goblin Warrior. Turn 2, you drop Torso Dork. Turn 3, you drop Boar Rider. And then turn 4, you drop Themia. Or you coin Themia turn 3 instead of the Boar Rider. It's insane. You basically gain 3 mana, 3, 4, and draw 2 cards. It's like absurd potential. And then 3 Elvish Champions. A lot of people seem to think that this card is like really OP or something. I think it's actually relatively situational. To be honest, it's one of the worst cards in this deck. You probably can cut 1. I will still run 2 because it can act as a swift creature and it's pretty good in aggro mirrors because it can often come down as a 3/3 there, 3/4 there. But still, it's not like really OP, but it's just an overall solid card to run in this deck. And then last we have 2 Ambush Strikes. I also think that these are probably one of the worst cards in this deck. But at the same time, I think you really don't want to cut them. Because Ambush Strike can act as an... like, combat tricks are good in this deck. Often you like have to float 1 mana. And then when an opponent tries to pick a favorable trade, you just surprise them with an Ambush Strike. And, well, obviously sometimes you just go face with the Ambush Strike. Like buff a creature, go face, and it enables you some kind of lethal. And now comes a very important point. If you want to play this deck, you always play for the board. You try to pick as favorable trades as possible. Don't blindly go face. Going blindly to the face is really bad. You need to keep the board under control and get repetitive damage with your minions. Just please, don't go blindly to the face. That's a really bad idea. Anyway, next we are gonna move on to the matchups. Well, the matchups. At first, let's start with any control deck. These are just very favorable matchups for you. It's extremely hard to lose to a control deck. Just if you see that you're facing a control deck, don't keep a hand where you don't have a 1-drop. And yeah, basically you just run over them. 3 mana 3/4 is extremely hard to deal with them. You basically almost always get Taimia value. And then when they stabilize at some point, you just have enough burst to finish them off. Fireballs, chickens, even Elvish Champions. And then moving on to the Harbinger Enoch. Harbinger Enoch is a slightly trickier matchup. Because, well, dealing with Harbinger is surprisingly tough. But Harbinger Enoch decks usually don't get good board before Harbinger. That's your main goal. Make them drop Harbinger on an empty board. And then you can probably like get rid of the Enchained Souls in some way and then trade favorably for Harbinger. Actually, Ambush Strike, of course, helps trading favorably into Harbinger, for example. Yeah, overall, just if you have the board before they get to the Harbinger turn, then you're still going to win. Despite Harbinger being really annoying for you. Well, then we have Hate Bears, which also run Harbinger, but I kind of classified them differently, because I think Hate Bears are a much more favorable matchup than Harbinger Enoch. Because Hate Bears have some really weak turns before Harbinger. Yeah, they can drop turn to Death Curse Shaman, but, well, you just, I don't know, take it down with Lizard Barbarian or something. Basically, they use 2 mana to deal with your 1 mana creature, and then the turn 3 is really weak. They don't have good 3-drops, and that's really good for you. So yeah, I think that Hate Bears is a favorable matchup despite running Harbinger, which is usually annoying to deal with, but they almost never get the board from you before Harbinger, and then you just snowball for the win. And then comes the only matchup that I think where I'm unfavored. It's the Passageway, like any Passageway deck. You don't run, what's the card called? Parallel Evolution, which means that you can't really deal with their big creatures efficiently. The Enoch version of Passageway, or like the Rage Corruption version of the Passageway, has Yara, which deals with your chickens, and that's really annoying. It has Berserk, that can very efficiently deal with 3 of your creatures. For example, you dropped 1-drop, 2-drop, and then a 3-drop, they play Berserk, your board is gone. That's really annoying. However, why I think it's only slightly unfavored is that Passageway deck is much less stable than our deck. Passageway deck doesn't always hit good targets. It can often brick, and then you just win. If they don't like high roll, well, it happens I think over 50% of the time. But still, if they don't high roll, you just noble for the victory. But the games against passageway decks are usually really one-sided. Then come the elves, which I think is basically, if you lose to elves, it's like you've been really unfortunate. You have chickens, you have fire blast, you have fireballs, you have flame rune warriors. You like deal with everything they play. You basically kill all the creatures, and then you will be left with having a couple of cards in your hand while they are empty-handed. You just outvalue elves so hard. Then come the soldiers, Alexa Valor, or like whatever version your opponent is playing. I classify them as the same because their core is really the same. Here you need to be careful, for example, of cards and then them dropping Master Tactician next turn. If you see it coming, then keep your Fireball open. And also Fire Blast is really efficient against them. Like Fire Blast can clear their entire board. It's just insane. And also you kind of need to be careful of them playing a turn 1 creature and then Center of the Light next turn. Always keep that in mind and don't lose to that. Often it's actually better to play a 1-drop and then Fireball turn 2 against them than to play just 1-drop and then 2-drop. Well, mirror match, I'm really not gonna go over it. It really comes down to whether you draw better than your opponent or not. To be honest, I think it's really frustrating to play. You need to get the board. That's like the main point in the mirror match. Don't go face, get the board, and draw chickens. Chicken is really good in the mirror match because chicken is always at least 1-for-1. Worst case scenario, opponent has to fireball it, for which he has to have mana open. Then another scenario is you kill a creature and no, they play Flame Rune Warrior, yeah, chicken dies. But you still got the 1-for-1. And then there is the scenario where they don't have answer for example, for chicken, and then you just win. So yeah. Then moving on to the random mid-range shit, here I'm thinking of like, for example, angels, also some other like mid-range decks that aren't really popular but are mid-range. I think these decks are even because mid-range has quite a few ways of dealing with your creatures. They can play big creatures. Actually, one creature that's really annoying for you is the 4-mana 4/6 order creature with 3 speed that can only attack or block alone and can attack and block an additional creature. It's surprisingly hard for you to deal with. Like, you need to have a Boar Rider and then Fireball, Boar Rider, Fire Blast, and he still needs to block it because it's 3 speed. You can't really pick a favorable trade and then just Fireball it. So yeah, and then there are like other beefy mid-range creatures, like for example in Angels there are the 3-mana 3/4 3 speed, then there is Antriel. Yeah, I still think that it's not really unfavorable, but it can be quite unpleasant at sometimes. But just play your perfect curve and pray that they don't have the perfect creatures to answer your curve. And then lastly, against all other aggro decks, I consider us to be favored because we outvalue any aggro deck, because we have like Fire Blasts, we have Daimias to draw cards, we have chickens that are good against other aggro decks because they trade really well. Just be sure to not lose the board and be aware of your life total. Like, for example, don't go for the race if you might die, because it's surprisingly hard to explain, but I think that racing another aggro deck is almost never the correct thing, because your deck is really good on the board. So focus on getting the board and you will, well, just win. So for the last words, I'm actually gonna say that I think it's really likely this deck is going to get nerfed. Like, I literally think there is no way this deck is not getting nerfed in the next balance patch, because, well, I gained over 300 ELA with, like, I think even 350 ELA with it in less than 24 hours. And I, of course, didn't play for 24 hours straight. I think I had like about 4 to 5 hours playtime during that time. It's just insane. I think that they should probably change the Mia, obviously, but about other cards, it's actually really hard to nerf this deck properly. I think Etix needs to be nerfed, but you can't really nerf Etix's additional card ability. You can like make Etix go to 20 HP, but then I think it's like really not that big of a nerf that doesn't change anything. So yeah, it will be really interesting to see what they do with this deck. Anyway, I was Sveiks, and well, maybe see you in another Decktech. Goodbye.